Hey, what's up, family? Thank you so much for joining me for this live stream. Really excited about this, and I'm glad that you could join me. I got my allergies are kind of flaring up a little bit, so you're gonna have to excuse me if you hear me clearing my throat and coughing. I got some water with me, so that should be all right. So thanks again for joining me for this live stream. This is something that I've been looking forward to doing for a while. And I'm doing this for a couple reasons. The first reason is just to be transparent and honest. And it leads directly to the second reason, which is to use as an example to help others who either may have been in the same situation, may be in the same situation, similar, maybe having questions about things, and especially because of the fact that it's no mistake if you're looking at me, but I'm an African American male. I'm 36 years old, and in the demographic of the African American community, this topic can be kind of taboo. And it also can be something that, I'm sorry, I have my GPS in my ears too, so I might pause every now and again just to hear what it's saying. But as I was saying, in the African American demographic and community, this is something that, if it is something that's a part of your life or a transition that you've gone through, or either a place where you are where you're questioning or doubting, you could feel all alone because, you could be in a situation where you don't really have anyone to talk to or anyone that you feel could relate. So, with that being said, I'm a person who, fortunately, when I was, it's been about, I would say, actively about coming up, really brushing up on 10 years now, because we're rounding out 2018. Can y'all believe it already? 2018 is pretty much in the books. I hope y'all been having a productive one so far. But it's been about 10 years, because I would say about brushing up on 2010 was when I really started to study really deeply and do a lot of research. Before that time, I'd say from 2005, excuse me, and I'm using my headphones so you can hear me clearly, so I'm sorry if I cough and I'm kind of in your ear. I would say between 2005 and 2009 was when little things started to crop up, where there were certain things that I grew up with that didn't quite make sense as I was getting older. For the most part, they only made sense from the perspective of tradition and customs. And they made sense from the perspective that exposure as well. The fact that it was the only thing. Many of these ideas were the only things I was exposed to. And so I didn't have anything besides my own personal education and cognitive dissonance in certain areas and common sense in certain areas that would rival with it, as I looked at what I had been taught and what I grew up to believe versus what I experienced or what the world looked like if I was able to just look at the world and not paint a picture that I wanted to, not take an idea or group of ideas that I adopted or believed and applied it to my perspective of the world, but where I looked at the world and then was able to gauge what reality was from just, looking at the world and then matching up what I believe with what I was experiencing or what I saw. So the first reason why I'm doing this is, like I said, honesty and transparency. The second reason is because I want to help. I want to help And you guys that know me, everyone that knows me, you know how much I am about helping people. And so this is another area that it's time for me to start helping people in. And the third reason, which is equally as important, is education. And that's because, for the most part, I'd say that what really changed my perspective was education. It was purely education on top of feelings and cognitive dissonances that I was having that wound up being confirmed once I did the research in one way or the other. Either it was confirmed, through historical research. It was confirmed through research of history. It was confirmed through research of psychology. It was confirmed through, allergies, y'all. I so apologize. It was confirmed through close examination and what they call exegesis, eisegesis, and exegesis of the documents that I've been dealing with, as well as other documents. And there was a lot of things that I learned that was kind of intuitive, that I felt already, and there was a lot of things that I just did not know, and that wouldn't be known. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. I got about an hour drive. I would say now until now about 45 minutes, so thanks for hanging with me. So there was a lot of things that I didn't know that I found out through research. The way that I grew up, let me start here. Let me start at the end of the road and then I'll go back. So for the last 12 years, let me go back farther than that. 2002. So for the past 16 years, I've had a career as, amongst other things, as a gospel musician. And I would say actively from 2002 to about 2016, maybe, really 2012, but up to 2016 because I was playing at a New Thought church. If you guys are not familiar with New Thought Christianity, check it out. I'll be educating on that as well. Just a lot of things for people to just be more exposed to what's going on, to other doctrines and faiths outside of theirs or offshoots. But actively, as a Christian and gospel musician from 2002 to 2012. 2002 was when I started taking lessons at the piano, and I got a job at a local church in Baltimore, and I was there for 8 years, and I had two other churches as well that I was minister music of and that kind of thing. So during that time, I built a company. You all are very familiar with the term fruition because it's written all over everything that I do. And Fruition started out as Fruition Music Incorporated, which was just a instrumental production-based company centered around the genre of gospel. And that went on to become one of the world's largest and most well-known companies, even to date, for instrumental gospel tracks. If you go to Google and just type in instrumental gospel tracks, you'll see that the company, the material that I've done, and the company in general are all the top results for anything related to instrumental gospel tracks. So it's a company that, if you guys saw the video that I put out last week, if you haven't, check it out. It's called I Trust That My Heart Will Be Heard. And I basically brushed on it where I said, I created a six-figure year business that I now can no longer operate in for philosophical and moral reasons. So this is a little bit more of the hashing out of that. From 2007 to now, it's a worldwide business. has helped out a lot of people, a lot of churches, a lot of people and groups and singers and artists and musicians around the entire globe on every single continent in places I can't even name. Something that I'm extremely grateful for as an accomplishment, and for all the people that it's helped. Which makes, this is the other reason why I'm telling this story as well, because if you're a person that has a major part of their life that's wrapped up in their religious or spiritual path, and things change, it really just is a complete 180, and especially if it's unexpected. The thing for me was from 2010 to 2014, I would say, even though I no longer consider myself Christian, it wasn't a thing that bothered me from the perspective of still continuing to operate and do things that really supported the path as a movement and as a philosophy. And then from 2014 to 2018, it just continued to change, where I no longer felt comfortable with doing that. And I'll give a lot of my reasons. This will just be the first video of a long length of videos. Please subscribe to my Aaron Hill TV channel, because this is where it's all going to be placed. And there's going to be another channel too I'll tell you all about. But for the first 4 years of the highest success of the business, everything was cool. Because I even now, as I do this video, I'm totally cool with different people's decisions for what's for them. Because I know, because this wasn't a thing that I just operated in from a business perspective. Like, it was my life. I was pretty much a minister, and it was something I took very seriously. And honestly, that's when things started to change. The more serious I got about it, the more I really researched and learned, the more I got all the way down to the core of it, the more I found issues and problems and things that I couldn't explain away via, it's just mysterious or beyond my understanding. It was, oh wow, I wouldn't have known this unless I researched to this degree. So that's the other reason why I'm telling the story too, because again, there's a lot of people who in different areas of life have experienced the same kind of transition. And I'll be creating a community, myself and my buddy, close friend, Andre Forbes. If you guys know him, if you don't know him, check him out. Andre Forbes of Music Man Dre Productions, or Hot Music Factory. If you check him out, it's something that there are some things that you've probably seen by him, some products and some videos. So anyway, we're going to start a community. I'll tell you more about that. But that's the last part of my career. Let me jump back now from the beginning. So I grew up as a Pentecostal Christian, grew up in a Pentecostal holiness church, and pretty much went to church with my mom from the time I was young. By the time I reached about 10 years old, I started going to church with my aunt, and that was around the time when I started really becoming steeped in the philosophy and just digging into it. For the next 8, by the time I turned 17 or 18 is when I started really digging into it for myself. It was no longer that I was going to do it because of the fact that mommy said so, or because my aunt did it. It was like, if I'm going to walk this path, then I'm going to really walk it. Like, I'm going to go all the way down to the core, and I'm not going to half-ass it, so to speak. Excuse me for people that have a problem with profanity. I don't believe in curse words, even though I do believe in respecting people. But yeah, it's about being real and authentic. So my deal was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I grew up, my mom, shout out to my mom, Cheryl Lawson, great mom. She raised me with respect. You know, all of the things that you guys appreciate about me now, respect and mannerism and positivity, I give a lot of that foundational credit to my mother. She brought me up to treat everybody fairly, to treat everybody with love and respect, which was one of the things that actually clashed with my philosophy and my theology, because although in an overall way it was about that within the faith, there also was and is the notion that unless you come this particular direction, there's no hope for you. and you are going to suffer a terrible eternal fate. And that didn't jive, that didn't line up with even the way my mother brought me up. And it definitely didn't line up with having my closest friends from the time I was 10, and especially once I hit 18, it didn't line up with my closest friends being Jewish, my closest friends being Hindu, my closest friends being Muslim, my closest friends being Buddhist. It didn't jive with that because it didn't make sense when I looked at my perspective, when I looked at my situation, and I realized that I had no choice in the matter as to how I was born, when I was born, what culture I was born into, and what tradition I was born closest to, and neither did they. It also didn't jive with the perspective that when I looked at their life and when things were really working out for them in a very serious and strong way, and in some cases better than my life. You know, maybe they were more fortunate, maybe their parents were more educated, maybe their parents had more exposure or had more finances, maybe their whole family just flourished more. And it didn't make sense from that perspective that I was the one, though, that was the most fortunate and that was a part of the elite and the elect. And that the hope was that they would somehow realize that one day, drop everything that was working for them and that they didn't have an issue with, and somehow have no point of reference to the experience, but somehow, you know, it was for them to be able to come my direction or convert to what I felt was correct. It just didn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense. And on top of that, that all this was set up by an entity who, you know, had love and care for everyone, but was omniscient and already knew who was going to be born where and how, and just the whole nine. I'll be digging into a lot of these ideas. We'll be learning about logical fallacies. We'll be learning about the burden of proof. We'll be learning about red herrings. We'll be learning about what they call arguments from ignorance. Just a whole nine, you know. So that didn't work with the way that I was even brought up. But at the same time, there were a number of other things that did work. You know, community, fellowship, positivity in certain areas, overall general positivity. So by the time I hit, I would say 16, I was really practicing the faith for myself, and my aunt at that time was someone who I considered my spiritual guide, so to speak, someone who was deeper in and very serious about it. And I remember probably my first experience of starting to have questions or looking at things like, something's not right here, is when I was 16, I went with my friends to the Hebrew Israelite Church. Shout out to all the Israelite brothers and sisters out there. And when I went there, this was at the time on, I believe, Park Avenue in Baltimore. When I went, it was something that opened my eyes up to a completely different thing than I was used to. Their level of application, their level of understanding, at least interpretation of the Bible, was so much deeper than I was used to, on a level where they could go to specific places and show you what they were saying and why, to a deep level, like a really deep level. And I knew at that time that it wasn't so much the case for my community. Not everybody, because these aren't umbrella statements, but in general though. And it wasn't for me. There were some things with it that wasn't quite my cup of tea, but I could appreciate it on a different level, and it gave me a wider scope of thought and what was going on and how different people thought. From there, it changed my perspective because there was a lot of things that I wasn't educated about that I learned later. And during that time, one of the people that was closest to me was trying to get me to come to the church and basically go in that direction. And the interesting thing for me was, I remember saying, it was a woman, I remember saying to her, I remember asking her a few questions about why she felt. And the interesting thing was, when she explained it to me, it was pretty much on the same path that I was on. The only difference that she was saying, in a nutshell, to just sum it up, was that the end result was the same as far as who was to be quote unquote worshipped and pleased and that kind of thing. The difference was how you get there, what kind of things you do that are appropriate to get to that place, and basically what the deity wanted and how the deity wanted you to service it. Now, the thing for me was the same thing that I've realized my other friends who were from different faiths, like how they felt when somebody approached them with something where they could hear what the person was saying, they could logically just understand what they meant as it was encapsulated in the example, but at the same time, though, what they had going on was like totally working for them. They didn't have any issues. Like it was like somebody trying to sell you it was like somebody trying to sell you, car insurance and you don't drive, or somebody, which this often happens to me, somebody who's trying to sell you, things for your windows as you go into a store and they're selling you some items for new windows and that kind of thing, and you don't own your home, or trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner with a blender on the top. You're just like, I'm all right, actually. But I looked at how convinced she was and how convicted she was, and I understood because I had some experience. But what I realized was like, wait a minute, we're going to the same place. You just think that I should take a different highway, and you're also coming with the same ramifications that my faith comes with if I don't do this, which is that doesn't matter if it quote unquote seemingly worked for me at the time. Doesn't matter. And this was the funny part. This was really funny because I said, well, let me ask you a question. This is when I got to the part where I realized it definitely wasn't for me, but I wanted to ask some questions that I thought was kind of interesting and funny. So I was like, do they have, is it anything music? Like my career within my faith is musical, and is within the actual services and that kind of thing, like the gatherings. And I was like, is there anything like that? And she was like, nah, but gotta find something else for you to do. And it just made me chuckle inside, but it also made me really on a serious tip go, okay, there's some issues here, because the truth of the matter is all these paths make sense when you're steeped in them and when they work for your life for a particular reason, whether they're coping mechanisms or mechanisms of community or outlets for different things, or if it's literally, I'm going to talk a lot about social benefits in future videos because I only got 30 more minutes and I got a lot to go. But social benefits, if the social benefits are there, and you could use anything to paint this picture, when you have groupthink within a community and a culture and a society, it benefits you to go in that direction, whether it actually completely works for you or not, mentally or cognitively. It, because of the fact that it's also where your music and your food and your fellowship and your gathering together for purposeful reasons come from, which I think, honestly, in my assessment now, going through all that I've gone through as far as study and application of all the major religions and spiritual paths, is really, I believe, the most significant thing for many people, even beyond all the beliefs themselves, is actually just more so the community oriented aspect, the aspect of support and belonging and identity and feeling of comfort, because we're all social beings. All of us are social creatures. And because that's the case, even if you aren't doing that and it's politics, it still winds up being the same thing, where whatever group you're a part of, you have more of an opportunity of receiving the social benefits that you need to survive and thrive on a daily basis. So I realized that all paths made sense when you come from that perspective, and when you come from the perspective of, like, this is literally the only thing that I've ever known and lived, and even if it wasn't, maybe it still, worked. And that led me to some issues, because I was saying to myself at that point, like, wait a minute. Everybody will tell me from their perspective that everybody outside of my own group will tell me that from their perspective, I mean well, but I've got it wrong. And everybody's story will actually be the exact same, which is, unfortunately, this is just the way that it is. There's only a few people. There's only a few select group of people that will know this truth, and it's their job from there to speak it outwardly to everyone else. If they don't take heed, then unfortunately, it's on them. We laid the groundwork, and we gave the example and that kind of thing, and we're the messenger. And that is everybody's story. Everybody's story also is, unfortunately, our interpretation is right, and everybody else is just misunderstanding. Now, the truth is, yes, like there are things like that in life. So true. The problem is when the whole concept from everyone is that this is the way that this was structured by an entity that is only about love and really just wants everybody to go in one particular direction. And here's the worst part, and I say that intentionally because people don't think about this. The worst part is when you apply the concept of omniscience to that, because now you create an entity that before it pressed the go button already knew everything that was going to transpire and still decided to go ahead and press the button. And I hate to say it for those that immediately challenge or think that free will, arguing free will is the way out, because it's not. Unfortunately, it's not. Because it doesn't matter. The only question you have to ask yourself is, free will or no, does an omniscient entity already know what you're going to do with your free will? And that's when I find it even more interesting, because people line up on different sides and don't even realize within their own community that they completely disagree on even that foundational subject. Which again, all this goes back to, but this was, for most people, the entire point. Or even worse, which I'll talk more about as well in future videos, the ramifications of us because we're the problem. Which then takes me to a concept of being able to say that in many ways, while we look at the empowering aspect of things, we completely miss the disempowering aspects, especially the self-deprecation and the self-deprivation and the downing of humanity. And for many people, we've now got accustomed to the idea that, and we don't hear ourselves when we do this, but that the downing of humanity actually is the lifting up of humanity. I put up a post a couple weeks ago, and please, go back through my posts if you get a chance, if you will. I mean, I might have put up a few posts since then, but if you care to, it's a post that starts off and says that some forms of naivety are mistaken for humility, and then I go on to expand on that. So all these things were, I'll go back to my initial situation. So my friend asked me about coming in that direction. I realized quickly that there's a bigger issue here that none of us are realizing. And then I go on. I realized that, in fact, at that time, I drew even closer to my particular faith and path, because I was like, yeah, like, I'm actually happy. And I knew I was. So at that point, I just started playing in the church. And for the first couple years, I was in a really good situation, one where the shoe was a little bit bigger than I could fit, but I was the perfect candidate for it because I had the right training and everything. The only thing I needed was experience. This is a sidebar joke for you all. Somebody said this to me a while back, and I thought it was a great joke. They said, "What's the one thing in life that you need, but you don't have it?" I'm sorry. What's the one thing in life that you need, but you can't get it unless you already have it? What's the one thing in life that you need, but you can't get it unless you already have it? That's experience. Think about that. That was a cool little thing. So I realized at that point I had the experience, so things were going well, and I'm focused on the music at that time. At some point, when I got the music under my fingers, and everything was pretty much on automatic, so to speak, where I can just flow, and I had a mastery of the craft and of the ministry, so to speak. I started paying attention more at that point to the doctrine. And that's when I started noticing some issues that I couldn't explain away via the same things that everybody else was using to explain them away, or the way that I even explained them away before. And so one of those experiences was an experience that I've had since as far back as I can remember. It was a first Sunday, Communion Sunday in church. And things were going as normal. We got to the part where everybody was coming up to the altar, and when I looked at everyone in the line as they were coming up, I saw the same expressions that I always saw, which was people in anticipation, some people feeling down because they felt like they had done some things that were, at that point, it was being held against them. Until they went through this particular ritual and that kind of thing, or people were happy. You just saw the whole emotion. And by the time we went through the ritual, then I saw the same responses that I always see, which were everybody now had a completely different feeling. Everybody was happy and joyous, and it made me start to really question: was this something that there was something real that was happening in what we would consider a completely different realm, or was this more of a psychological thing that was happening, where people were both holding things against themselves, and then when they were ready, because they felt that an entity was ready, and I say that because different people, I use that term, sorry if that gets on anybody's nerves, but I use that term because everybody calls the deity or the entity something different. So I'm trying to respect everybody's what they say, because I don't want to get into arguments of semantics, and that kind of thing. Or I don't want people to be thrown off in that way and say, "Oh, that's the problem." It was the wrong name. These are things that yeah. So anyway, at that point, I'm like, is this something that is going on psychologically? Especially because I was looking at the act, and it went against a number of the things that we talked about dealing with forgiveness, past, present, and future. But I was looking at us and realizing, wait a minute, we're treating the deity as if it's one of us, and the things that we're telling ourselves, even coming into this path, that all past, present, and future is forgiven, we're not actually operating that way. And I realized why. It didn't make sense to us, actually. I mean, if I tell a person right now that anything they do to me is already, don't worry about it, it's already forgiven, or what have you, if they step on my foot in a month and they don't say anything, I'm probably going to look at them like, hey, you just stepped on my foot. Are you going to ask for forgiveness? Are you going to say you're sorry? Are you going to feel bad that you did that? And the person would as well, which is the same thing I saw us doing, but that wasn't necessarily what we were telling ourselves theologically, though. And so I realized, wait a minute, okay. So that was something where I realized there was a human aspect. And then as I got deeper into my studies, I realized the anthropomorphism on a very, very deep level. And I realized that at least in my case, because I'll have to say a number of times, even though I do feel like I'm speaking for more people than myself, but I'll just say I'm speaking for myself just so everyone can just hear things clearly and not get tripped up over things, is I realized that as opposed to what I was telling myself as far as being created in the image of the deity, that I was actually creating the deity in the image of myself. And that once I started doing research, and especially when I went to school for it, because I'll tell you guys more about that, but I wound up studying formally. I studied in seminary, and I studied religious studies formally with Yale University. Not seminary, I'm tripping, I'm sorry, I'm driving. My phone's telling me to rotate. Okay. I studied, formal education, and I studied in theological schools. I'll tell you more about that. But at any rate, I realized the heavy, heavy, heavy use of anthropomorphism, not just starting now, but the foundations of the situation, the stories, and the foundations of the history. It got to a point where I started realizing that we were more so creating these ideas in our heads and painting things in a direction that made sense to us as far as relating to an entity that was very similar to us, just with more sovereignty, more than anything else. But before I get to that experience and me starting to feel like, wait a minute, I really think this is something we're doing psychologically, and it has power, because it's just like anything else. There's power in making up your mind about a particular thing and going forward. It's literally what I operate off of every day. But there came with some serious ramifications, though. And one of those ramifications was very, very low esteem, or actions that produced or that will reinforce low esteem in order to lift up another principle, and the suspension of critical thinking, and the suspension of education, or the dismissal of it, or not, or just not even being interested in it, and also ideas that do not at all line up with the way that we operate in real life once we come out of that setting, or once we come out of that particular example. In fact, and there's a lot of examples where it's exactly the opposite, where we think one way in that realm, and in reality we actually aren't. We don't support those ideas at all. We don't support entities at all that would do anything like that. But in many cases, because we continue to tell ourselves that we're just so minuscule and just so don't know anything, and I put up a post recently where I was saying that we're leaning to our own understanding to tell ourselves to not lean to our own understanding. And so, there's some other things I'll talk about with that, but I'll fast forward, and this won't be the last time I talk about these things. It's just I've got 15 minutes, and as you can see, I'm only I'm really at the tip of the iceberg. That led to me deciding, you know what, it's time for me to put my predisposed ideas aside. Not even aside. Let me rephrase that, because this is actually important about what I'm going to talk about in the future, the near future. Let me put my ideas and my beliefs on the same, let me lay it all out on the table and put it on the same table in the same way that I would lay anything else out, to be reviewed, to be challenged, to not just accept it as, oh, it's gotta be true. Because what happens with that, and I promise you, this is one example where I say we don't do this in real life, in any other place, where any system that we follow, we know for a fact that it is not beyond review. And we know for a fact that the only way to better it and to make sure that there are no harmful ideas, no primitive ideas or outdated ideas, or ideas that served us at one point but no longer serve us now due to our present level of education and understanding. We don't do that. We don't think that any other system is beyond review other than our faith traditions. The problem, though, with that, and take it out of the realm of this subject just for a second, just apply it to anything else. You can apply it to education in school. If you sit down, if you're with an organization and they have particular principles that are working, and you go forward, you create a structure and it has some positive benefits, you come back at least annually and review those ideas. And the main reason why is because if there's anything in it that's mistaken or inaccurate or not helpful, you can't identify it unless it is up for review periodically, and not up for review as in let us go back to just make sure that what we think is true, or what we've been professing is true, and then to find more reasons for that to be true. That's not how we do anything else. And we know that that's a completely flawed system. So I realized though that that's one of the biggest things that we don't realize. And so I even would say honestly that any system that comes from that perspective is not ultimately in the long-term sense helpful for us, even though it may provide temporary benefits and temporary help and temporary coping with things in life. So I decided to do my own research, and the first thing that I did was put those ideas all on the table and also put everybody else's ideas on the table all equally. So I studied my particular tradition, Christianity, and the Bible from end to end. I studied religious studies with Yale University, end to end, cover to cover, chapter for chapter, book for book, and looked at and studied from the perspective of historical context first, before theological context. Or let me rephrase that. Historical, yeah, I guess I could use it that way. What I mean by that is many of us look to our books, our holy books, our respective holy books, in a biased way. We don't mean it. It's just is where we look. We look to it in a biased way, not from a perspective of like, let me learn the history of this. So I did that for Christianity. I did that for Islam. I read the entire Bhagavad Gita. If you guys watch my vlog, the Vegan Soul Fest vlog, please watch it if you haven't on my YouTube channel, Aaron Hill TV. There's a part in there where I run into a guy who's he's Hindu, and they're selling Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is the Hindu scriptures for those of you all that don't know, and it's a part of a larger work called the Mahabharata, and it's pretty amazing. Like, these are things that I encourage people. Like, keep doing what you do. Study something else. Like, understand why other people really feel the way that they feel, because you'll be very surprised, and you'll also learn a lot too. You'll learn a whole lot. So the Bhagavad Gita is like one of my favorite books to date, even more than the Bible, to be honest. And it's for a number of reasons. But I did that. I studied Buddhism. I read a lot of the Upanishads, the Tao Te Ching, the Lao Tzu, and then I also studied New Thought and everything under the sun. Everything. So that took my education level it took it to a place where, yeah, there's a lot of things now that I realize I only believed and subscribed to because I just didn't know anything more than that. I just had no concept of anything beyond that. Now, this doesn't happen for everybody, so this isn't one of those type of situations where I'm doing this video so I can start converting folk. Like, nah. Like I told you all from the beginning, and if you're here and you just joined, I'm doing this because of two main reasons. One, because I'm more worried about people. I'm more concerned about reaching people who can identify than I am concerned about, people who disagree and who this offends, or who they, I hope nobody's offended, because I try not to come off negatively. But yeah, I want to reach those people, because if you aren't one of those people and you just have no idea what it's like, you have no idea what it's like when you feel like you have nobody who can relate, and you also feel you feel that because of other people's beliefs and their predispositions, that you can't even talk to them without it just throwing them the wrong way. I have, like right now, I have an aunt, that same aunt that I had the closest relationship with, who really was like a second mother to me, who doesn't speak to me at all right now. And that's something that, I know that most of you all, almost everybody that's watching the stream, you probably disagree with that. You probably think it's absolutely terrible. The truth is, I do too, but at the same time, I understand why. I understand why, because the truth of the matter is, by definition, it's what she believes, and she has, particular scriptures and that kind of thing to even help her to understand why she should be that way, or why she should do that. Now, I have to talk about it in a longer way because I know somebody is probably saying, "Yeah, but she just got it wrong." But nah, I get it. I get it. That's one of the issues. I wish actually that she could see that these ideas were clearly mistaken, and at the time that they were just written by people who were doing the best they could to understand the world that they were living in at the time with their present level of education and their present level of understanding of things on a broader scale. Like, we have Google now. We know what people are doing on the other side of the earth. They didn't, you know. So that's that. And then I have a guy who was my absolute best friend. In fact, during that time when I was actually really steeped in it the most, and where it was, yeah, I was, and he no longer speaks to me now. So this is, an effort for people who deal with that, or and all right. So I've got 6 minutes, and what I'm going to do tomorrow, the same time, I'm going to be making a 1 hour drive as well. I'm going to go ahead and pick up the next part, and I might do this every day. Like, drop some feedback, please. Drop a line. I literally only touched the tip of the iceberg, so if there's anybody out there that's like, I know what happened, like, I promise you, just hold tight, because I got a lot to talk about with regards to education in this matter. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to talk about a lot of things that many people listening has just never heard before or never thought about in that perspective, especially once I get down to the root historical context of things and original it's so much. So with that being said, with the last 5 minutes, I'll just say that I'll fast forward to the end, and then we'll come back, and tomorrow I'll start from that place and trek forward. That led me to basically studying every religion and spiritual path, all the popular, ones as well as the ones not so popular, and finding both really, really good ideas, really, really helpful ideas, and then seeing where we missed the mark. And I say where we missed the mark because of the fact that, in my understanding at this point, it is us who are writing the stories, and we are dictating and feeling that this is a perspective that also is projected onto the entity of worship as well, more than anything. So that's what led me to appreciating so many silver linings going through everything, and also realizing, wow, this is where we're missing it, and this is where the people of this particular faith don't realize it, and it's only because of one reason. It's just that they have a foundational predisposition to this, as opposed to an objective standpoint where they can stand back and really examine the thing for what it is, or examine it in light of other factors. So I feel like ultimately, and many people are at this place, there are more people that I meet nowadays, and this is credit to where we are. We are evolving. We are continuing to evolve. We are continuing to understand things. We won't know everything, but that's not even the point. That isn't what makes us so insignificant and just in need of salvation. I'm gonna say it, it's not that. It's not that. But we are evolving, and what we need to do more than anything is stop demonizing our humanity. We gotta stop it. We really gotta stop it, because it's killing us while we think it's uplifting us. It is killing us. It is making it be where more people are giving up on life, and more people are giving up on. Yeah, many of us are in a predicament and in the mindset of a desire for things to go better in life for myself and for those around us, but at the same time, everything's going to hell in a handbasket anyway, and it makes us literally give up in ways. Again, this is not so apparent, because from one perspective it would seem like we're totally empowered and totally about that life, so to speak. But there are many things in many of our perspective that we've totally dismissed from the equation, and looked at as like, what's the point? Problem though is that doesn't help us now, and it doesn't help us in the future. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause this stream. I tell you what, this is what I'm going to do. Don't leave me. Don't go too far. I know there's a million other things calling for your attention on Facebook right now and everywhere else. So a little old me, is just not, I'm not the most important thing happening. But I say that because I'm getting ready to do a really, really great event with my brother Clarence Ward. I'm going to live stream that, so tune in for that, for some great music tonight. And then, based on the comments to the video I'm doing now and the last live stream that I was just doing, when I drive back home for another hour, if you guys are interested, I'll keep talking about it. If not, if nobody has anything to say, then I'll just wait till tomorrow. But if you do, I'll do that, and I'd gladly do that because I have a lot to talk about. I have a lot. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes of your time. And I promise you that if you give me a good amount of your time, not now, but just in general over the long haul, as I go through this and as I teach, inform, educate, and even like my goal is to actually help to bridge the gap from the perspective of coexisting. And my goal is to help bridge the gap, to help people who are walking down this particular path or this particular path or this particular path understand people who aren't walking down that path and who are walking down their own paths. I don't expect for our world to become totally secular, overnight. I don't expect it may not ever be that way. I don't expect for our world to be, I don't expect for everybody to be secular humanists. Like, I don't. But what I do feel like my life can be a contribution to is the bridging of the gap. There's something that, in fact, those of you all that follow Christianity, you all are familiar with Carlton Pearson. He's somebody actually who I know personally. And there's something that he says, I don't know if it came from him or somebody else, but I like when he says this. Is a nice little quote. He says, we don't all have to go along to get along. Or we can mind the same things without having the same mind about those things. It's already happening in our world. I just want to be a part of bridging the gap to take it to another level in just what I can do. My life philosophy is the Mahalia Jackson philosophy, if I can help somebody. And I know that I can. So that's my goal. My goal is to help bridge the gap. My goal is that people will be able to walk together hand in hand, and it won't matter whether they're part of a faith tradition or not. It won't matter. But people will understand each other to a deeper degree. And that's what I want to help with, that understanding. There are too many people out here that's dismissing everybody else and don't know a damn thing about what they believe or why. Like, really. There's so many people. That's why I put up the, if you haven't seen it already, look at my profile picture and look at the quote that's in the background. You'll see it's one of my favorite quotes. And I just happened to be in a cafe and ran into it. And I was like, I got to take a picture with this. All who wander are not lost. All who wander are not lost. In fact, most of the people who are secular humanists or atheists, they not only are not uneducated people, it's the reason why they're at that point. It was because actually of education. It was because of actually doing the research. It was because of the fact, like I sit here now, knowing things to a deeper degree than even when I professed as Christian. I know Christianity to a way deeper degree now. And I'm not even just talking about in criticism. I'm talking about in just even, it's, we'll talk more about that. But yeah, my goal though is to help people with education and to understand each other better. And it's to help people who don't have anybody to relate to and have to keep quiet about this for so long, to finally say, oh my gosh, somebody understands, and I'm not crazy. I knew I wasn't crazy, and everybody else around me just kept painting this picture like I was crazy, or I couldn't even say anything because I was going to lose my whole family, or I was going to get kicked out, or I was going to be excommunicated. Like all the things that are so opposite, so opposite of what most of us say that the whole deal is about. But again, that's not our fault. It really is not our fault. It is something that, again, when you don't have a way to look at things objectively, and when you start off with something already with a predisposition because of the fact that it makes you feel good or it's something that has worked for you, you know, I mean, hell, like crack worked for people. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that I said that, actually, because somebody might be offended by that. But like, there are many things that work for us that ultimately may be having a harmful effect in some way, well, even if it's just on our perception. And again, if we're convinced that there is no way that it could be mistaken, if we're convinced that there is no way that something in it could be outdated or primitive or obsolete, then okay, even if it doesn't affect us, even if we're happy or content, we may not realize how it's affecting someone else in a negative way, and we may not even mean it. You know, there's so many people that I run into on a day-to-day basis that, you know, they may be doing something or saying something that's completely insulting to someone else or myself or anybody, but they don't mean it, though. They don't mean it. They just honestly, and that's why I'm glad that they honestly just don't know, and they don't realize, or they may not know any better. And that's honestly why I feel like my personality, one of the things I pride myself on is patience and kindness and friendliness. And, you know, I'm that way because it's just A, part of my DNA, and B, like, I see the power of it. I see the power of it. Every last person needs patience and understanding. Every last person. I sure do. So the best thing for me to do is to be able to extend it to another in order to receive it. You know, these are all things that we, you know, much of our traditions are based on. My issue are the toxic aspect, the cancerous things that we don't realize are cancerous and that we need to get out of the equation. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and pause. We kick off this set in 20 minutes, everyone. So tune back in. Thank you so much for dropping a line. And yeah, Tamala, thank you so much for dropping a comment. I'm going to fully respond to your comment and engage, and I can't wait to. So give me a few minutes. I'm gonna go ahead, jump on back on my live stream, and enjoy this set we're about to do. We're there from 9. We got a 9 o'clock set and 11 o'clock set. So, and I will talk to you guys later. Thanks so much for hanging out. I love you all, and be kind to someone, love someone, show some patience, and I'll talk to you all shortly. Peace.